All right, folks, welcome back to PrepperNow. I'm going to talk today about how we are getting closer and closer to global conflict, and a lot of the different regions, theaters, whatever you want to call them, that are going on that are problematic. So let's start with one that we're not real familiar with and is emerging and evolving, and that is in the Southcom region, as it's known, where we have learned that we've got 4,000 personnel being sent. We've got multiple carriers and, things like that are going to be sent as assets to basically be right off the coast of Venezuela to patrol and possibly contain, maybe even go into conflict with Maduro and his band of narco terror folks. PrepperNow is now being sponsored by Augusta Precious Metals. They're a member of the Better Business Bureau, and you can check them out online at AugustaPreciousMetals.com, and a great place to consider putting your retirement if you want to put it into a gold or silver IRA. So this is a new one. This is kind of concerning that we're getting to a place where this might become a reality, that we have conflict in our hemisphere. So, we've part of the reason why I think T-Man got into office was because people were seeing things like what happened in Colorado, where apartments were taken over by bad hombres that were from down south. And of course, that was Tren de Aragua, which comes from Venezuela. Well, you see that. You see these terrible videos of people frightened and doors getting kicked in and all that. That's going to have an effect. We've had a lot of issues from those friends coming up here and doing terrible things. Well, now it seems like T-Man administration is going to go and start to confront this and do things that could potentially put conflict right at our doorstep, whatever that may look like. We've never had anything like this before. So when you're seeing all these things going along in the Middle East and out in Europe, and then all of a sudden a new theater possible. Okay, we haven't even talked about Asia, and Asia right now is just kind of sitting out there. So this is a new region where conflict wasn't really imagined, and now it's possible. It's a thing that could really happen, to the point where assets and people are being sent to potentially confront that. And then you listen to what Maduro said. He said, I'm going to be sending possibly 4 million militiamen to meet this coming, whatever we want to call it. I mean, this buildup. And that's really what it is. It's a buildup. So that is incredibly concerning. And I don't know. We'll just have to see where it goes. I really don't have a prediction on it. It might just be a show of force. It might be something real. It might be something real intense. Now let's move on to the Middle East. The Middle East, of course, has been going on, and it's been well covered by me, especially on the crisis report. And all I can say is every time we get close to a peace, or we get close to potentially getting some kind of a ceasefire, a deal, a hostage deal, it always like falls through and then seems to get worse from there. There's not that many hostages left. The look gets, from a public, relation standpoint, uglier and uglier for Israel. And so, it just, I think Netanyahu knows that he's got a small window to work with to get this stuff done. And if he doesn't get it done, well then it's not going to work. Like he's going to get moved out, kicked out, pushed out, whatever. His government will collapse, and at that point he really won't be able to finish the job. There's a lot of Israelis that want him to finish the job. There's a lot of Americans that want him to finish the job. And if not, the years of what he would see as accomplishment, well, that's going to be all kicked to the curb. It's not going to be, they'll come in and they'll undo all that has been, in his mind, gained. Also, the UN came out and said this is officially, a starvation, a famine that's going on. Now, of course, the Israelis push back on that. They say, no, it's not, yada, yada. And that's all conjecture. That's all for, people to sit there and hammer out. But I think this time we're not going to be in any kind of an area where a ceasefire, I think this is one of the last times a potential ceasefire will be offered. And the reason why is because, first and foremost, there's not that many hostages left. And if there's not that many hostages left, then you don't really have anything to work with. And, they keep saying, I think there's like 10 to 20 left, tops, out of the hundreds that were taken. And they don't even really know absolutely for sure if these people are still alive. And a lot of the people they want to get back are already deceased. So I think there's a lot of pressure on Netanyahu. I think his window is closing, and I think it's going to kind of go sideways. And if it goes sideways, it could take the region and kind of get it going. Hamas has said, hey, we're going to, get a ceasefire or whatever. And then Iran has basically in the last couple weeks been saying this whole thing with Israel has paused. And it really has. I mean, we're just kind of at a stopping point right now. And everything will get going again. And I really do think that you could see an escalation and fighting between Israel and Iran get going again. Now, as it pertains to Europe, last week, we had all of these meetings and there was Alaska and the Europeans came over the pond and joined with Trump and had these, high-level meetings that honestly looked about as promising as I've seen. I mean, if you know where they were, they could have potentially stopped this conflict in April of 2022, but it got railroaded. And honestly, it was Europe and Ukraine that really did it. At that point, Russia had been, where we can stop the lines here, and we've made our point, blah blah blah. And Russia is the aggressor, but that's not going to work. That's been so far gone now that it doesn't even matter. And so now, over the last couple days, there's been major tit-for-tat strikes going on. 2 days ago, you had a Russian drone basically loiter over Poland, about 50 kilometers inside, for about 2-3 hours, I think they said it was. Damage was done to homes. So that's a problem. There were strikes by Russia into Ukraine proper that were like hundreds of missiles and drones and all this stuff, and that did a lot of damage and was a big one. But the main thing was we hit this company that is a part, or not we hit them, Russia hit them, hit this company that was a part of the American Chamber of Commerce. It's one of the biggest over there in Ukraine, called Flex. And a lot of, people in America, they're mad about this thing, and it's, directly affecting American money. That's the kind of stuff that makes it so escalation can occur. Now, I don't personally think you're going to see, any kind of nuclear mushroom cloud kind of stuff. People will take that, they'll threaten it. I think we have enough of an understanding of mutually assured destruction that something in that realm will not happen. However, taking peacekeeping forces, as they want to call it, or a coalition of the willing from Europe, that I think has never been more on the table. Trump came out yesterday and said, hey, maybe it's time for Ukraine to go on the offensive. He likened it to a sports ball game where all you can do is defense and you can't do offense. That was a pretty big change in rhetoric. And he basically said, maybe it's time for Ukraine to start really striking hard into the regions of Russia. They're doing that with Western technology, Western assets, munitions, missiles, whatever. That could up the thing. And I really think if we don't get some form of a ceasefire or pause or even just push in the right direction of what's going on in these theaters of conflict, I do think that it'll get to the point where it starts breaking out all over. I think that there's going to be some kind of a flashpoint at some point, and then at that moment, the sides for the kickball teams will be all picked, and all the theaters will start going up in flames. You'll see Asia, you'll see the Middle East and Europe get going even further, and then you'll even see places on our hemisphere that really get going. And that's kind of where we're at. We're just to a point where all of these things are in a holding pattern, waiting for the big flashpoint, and it's just going to take the right swift kick in the nuts. And again, I don't think it's going to be nuclear, but I think it's going to be protracted and nasty. And that's the problem. And so we wait for all that, see where it all goes, and I guess we'll just kind of figure it out when it all starts to happen. Until then, you keep prepping, keep doing what you're doing. But my track record's been pretty on the ball with a lot of this stuff. And I'm not talking about days or minutes. It might take years. Like, it might be like 20, 30 or something like that. I don't know. We'll just have to see. But all this conflict is coming. And if it wasn't, I think it would have been resolved by now. We've had so many trips to the negotiating table. Doesn't even really seem like a thing anymore. All right, friends. If you like what we're doing here, hit that like button, do the subscribe thing, darken out the bell. Join us on Twitter, Mine, Gabs, X, True Social, Subscribe Star Locals, Substack, and we'll keep pumping out the material. All right, there'll be no live stream tonight. I got to play some music ball, but I'll probably have one in the afternoon. Until then, God bless you all, and we will see you on the next one.